Riccardi, 10 to 1, 550 KTSA.
KTSA News Time is 10:09. Good morning to you. It is Friday, November 12th, 2010, and it is time for Gang of Four. It's time for a weekend. It's time for Gang of Four. We can't have one without the other. We're going to meet the gang. We're going to kick around the big news stories of the week here on News Talk 550 KTSA. Also a Best of the Week hour coming up in our noon hour as we get set to head over to Magnolia Pancake House for our Riccardi Party listener lunch. But let's meet the gang. She's a freelance journalist with a mouthful of water. Sorry about the timing there. Elaine Wolff, welcome back to Gang of Four.
Thanks so much, Jack. I'm very happy to be
Elaine
here.
rocking her Annie Lennox hairdo that we debuted last time.
I knew you'd be disappointed if I didn't keep it, so I'm
Do
going to
you,
for a while.
answer me honestly, do you put more thought into your appearance now that we video Gang of Four?
You know, it sort of is in the back of my mind, but not, I haven't changed anything dramatically.
You don't go shopping the week before.
I haven't scheduled like a makeup appointment
like
ahead
Joe
of time,
Reinagel
right?
does. No, okay, all right.
Yeah, I might invest in a makeup artist if you keep it up.
What? Yeah, get one for me too. Maybe we can get a 2-for-1 deal. What's new in your world?
All sorts of stuff is new, actually. I was just telling Lyle outside that I'm working on a project, a local media project, politics and culture, and I can't say too much else about it yet. But if you invite me back in like 6 weeks, I'll have all sorts of details
when
for
you're
you.
able to, please come back and tell us about it. Love to talk to you about that. All right, so Elaine Wolff is here. Also, Joe Reinagel is the sports director at Ken's 5, former KTSA sports guy, and I guess one of the big stories heading into the weekend is UTSA, and is it Texas State?
Texas State,
going into the WAC.
It's a great move for both of those schools, obviously. I mean, it elevates them tremendously, and more money, more exposure, all the good things. So, UTSA might take its lumps for a few years, but great move for them.
love college football, and I'm excited that it's becoming more a part of the scene here. But, when I heard the guy say, before you know it, they'll be in a bowl game, that's a little,
Well, I don't know. They kind of let everybody in bowl games these days, don't they? So I don't know. It could happen quite possibly pretty soon. So
be in the Hersheimer Carburetor Bowl game or something
like that, right? Yeah, the college football is the only sport that plays exhibition games after the regular season. So
and of course, Jason Garrett making his debut.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see.
And it'll be an easy game, no problem. They just have to go to New York and play the Giants. That's a nice way to ease in, right?
Culture change in Dallas.
This was interesting. I read a columnist who said that only 13 of the 72 interim coaches since 1960 have had a winning record.
Wow.
So you just don't have much of a chance when you take over like this.
Well, you never know. It's that whole on-paper thing, but then you get on the field, it's chemistry, it's execution, it's all that stuff, and injuries, obviously, but you never know.
If they win 2 games, he'll be hailed as the coach of the year.
Well, and I think Jason Garrett's done, actually, unless he goes 8-0 regardless.
He won't. He will not have a shot at the job.
I don't think so. I really don't.
Do
Jerry's got to make a splash because he's got to sell tickets. So he wants a big name up there.
John Gruden?
I'd love to see John Gruden, and I think Gruden would like to be there as well. And I think he could handle Jerry Jones as well. So that's who I'm pulling for.
We'd all like to handle Jerry Jones, but I think we mean that in a different way. All right, so Joe Reinagel is here. Also, State Representative-elect Lyle Larson. How about that?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I don't think we've talked since the morning after the election, but you were elected in House District 122.
Right, sure was.
And so a lot of people listening right now, you are their new state rep. And what goes on now? Is there do you go to classes or what?
Well, you get shock treatments. That's the first thing that's required.
Yeah,
you wake up and figure out exactly what you did and got yourself into. Speaking of going into the WAC, I'm going into the WAC in Austin.
Yes.
But it's you go through an orientation process first part of December. You sit down and you start talking to the leadership. It's interesting. The big struggle in the party right now is, do we keep Joe Strauss or not?
Yeah,
and there's a big fight amongst the Tea Party folks that emerged into the Republican Party this year. Their focus is basically the voter ID bill. And also the fiscal issues. The social conservatives, they don't feel comfortable with Joe because there were some initiatives that didn't pass the first time. Bottom line is, if you'd use a sports analogy, you look at the numbers, the previous speaker, our majority went from 88 to 76. With Joe Strauss, it went from 76 to 99. Mm-hmm. And so I've got confidence in Joe. He's a lifetime friend. I've known the family. My dad was their veterinarian, and so I've got a good relationship. And it's good for San Antonio to have the speaker based here out of San Antonio, because there's a lot of privileges there in bringing infrastructure dollars, bringing dollars for education into the community that he feels strong about.
Well, you're already on the job. Man, that was like an off-the-cuff floor speech. But listen, my listeners would love to give you some orientation.
Oh, okay. Well, that's great.
Anytime
I
you
can
need
use
some, come on over. We've got it. We'll do it right here.
I'm an Aggie. They need to talk slow and write big, and I'll get through it.
The state is in an even bigger hole. The Financial Times reported this week that the deficit now in Texas may be more like $25 billion. We're one of 39 states operating in this kind of a hole. This week, the President's Bipartisan Deficit Commission came out with a draft report, not even a final report, that's so controversial that even its own members say they can't support this report and won't sign it, and really, in fact, doesn't solve the problem, doesn't even achieve the goal, the very sort of modest goal the President set for it. So we just signaled in this election that we're very concerned, that we feel the country is going in the wrong direction, but we don't seem to be translating that into action that Republicans and Democrats will both take. What's going on with that?
Well, I think bottom line, I saw the mandate come in from this election. It's about fiscal matters, and people want the government, both at the state and the federal level, to make some drastic cuts in spending. And I think that's going to be the debate in Washington and in Austin.
Don't they want Washington to do what they see state capitals doing in Indiana, in New Jersey? Don't they want that kind of dramatic cutback in not only spending but the actual size of government?
Absolutely. Not only do they expect it, they're going to demand it. In 2012, if people don't give them what they want from the standpoint of curtailing the spending, then you'll see another shift in the election process.
But where do they go, Elaine? I mean, if voters feel like neither Republicans nor Democrats will do this, and we just put the Republicans in, and already you've got people like Mitch McConnell saying, no, we're not going to do away with earmarks.
Right. I think the next election is going to be the really interesting election, because you're going to see how difficult it is to actually achieve what the public thinks they want. But of course, part of the problem, I mean, we ultimately are the problem. We like government spending often when it happens in our district where we can see what's going on. I think a lot of us are pretty excited about what's happening with the Riverwalk extension. It's a great quality of life improvement, things like that. But we don't like it when it's happening elsewhere. And so that's the crux of the problem in a lot of ways.
So is that it, Joe? We only want to slash other people's programs?
Well, I think so. And I think to completely do away with earmarks is really, it's not achievable, is it? I mean, seriously, you can't just say we're going to stop everything, because, I mean, it's been politics for years and years and years, hasn't it? That's just the way it works. I'll give you this if you give me that. And I think it's more responsible earmarks, though, if you can use those two together. I'm quite sure, but you're right. The Riverwalk project, and there's other projects that these earmarks actually do some good. So I don't think you can go in. It's unrealistic to me. Is you can go in and just say we're going to stop all earmarks. Well, I don't think it's possible.
Why can't would a balanced budget amendment work at the federal level as it works at the state level with a number of states? I mean, that's really what's causing some states to get their affairs in order, is that they're legally bound to do that. Could you do that in Washington?
You could, but you'd have...
We never will, but
you'd have huge cuts, obviously, to achieve that, just because of the debt service that's involved in. And you can eliminate earmarks. There's a number of congressmen that have made the pledge that they will not take any earmarks. And you've got essentially a bankrupt country, a $14 trillion in a hole. What is their credit rating? The credit rating's probably 200. Nobody in their right mind would lend money to the U.S. government based on its debt that they've taken on. So I think that the lack of discipline that every congressman and every senator have displayed over the course of the last decade is coming back to haunt us, and it's going to take a different type of political person to go up there and say, essentially, we don't have the money in the states from the standpoint of...
Is it possible things aren't bad enough yet?
How bad would you like them to get?
Well, what I'm saying is, I've heard people say, we're not really at the point where people are taking this seriously yet.
It is very difficult, I think, for people to understand what the deficit means and how that actually operates on the economy and what it means in people's day-to-day lives, what it means for economic growth. And it doesn't help that you hear different things from different sides,
yeah.
right? But I mean, I think the conversation we have to have is what is it we really absolutely want government to do? What is it we think we depend on it for, and that we think it's worthwhile to spend our taxpayer dollars on? To take just a recent example, food safety issues. There have been a number of food safety issues the past few years. People have died as a result of this. I think a lot of people would agree that that's a place where we want some kind of meaningful oversight. That oversight was eroded a lot during the past decade or so, and so then you see the results in these things happening. Is that the sort of thing we want to be cutting? But that seems to me like the little dark corners that get snipped, and then suddenly people's quality of life does go down.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think you're raising a good question, which is we have to answer honestly the question what we want government to do. But see, that's coming at it from the people's end. Politicians don't say, well, let's start over again with just the core issues. Every project, every division of every agency has a patron, has a protector, has somebody in Congress that looks out for it. And I don't know how you ever change anything. And the Republicans are just as bad as the Democrats with this, Lyle Larson.
Well, obviously the culture's got to change, and as far as the pain threshold, whether people are feeling it or not, when the government starts making cuts, that's when you're going to start hearing a lot of folks. The gnashing of the teeth will start. Right now, they've been very careful and diplomatic about indicating which areas, which programs are going to be cut. I think in 6 months, both at the state and the federal level, you'll hear people screaming that the government is backing away from programs that they've been perpetually supporting for decades. We don't have any choices. I think what we saw in that election a couple of weeks ago was essentially people want us to curtail government spending, and now the tough work is going to take place both in D.C. and in Austin.
But Lyle, when you talk about that, though, isn't it you're talking about career politicians that have been doing this for years? Yeah. And when they go back to their constituents and they don't get the earmarks or the spending that they're normally used to having, aren't they going to lose all of their support and basically get thrown out of office?
Well, I think that unreasonable folks, but look at earmarks. If you look at the Riverwalk that Elaine brought up, you know, who are the people that are advocates for the Riverwalk? Are people actually going to vote against a congressman because he didn't support an earmark going to the Riverwalk? No. The folks that are benefiting directly, the hotelers and the people, but the people in San Antonio, if you look at the last time we had an election, it didn't pass. People did not support putting money in a bond to support the expansion of the Riverwalk, and so there was other ways of doing it. But from the standpoint of from a drainage project or an educational initiative in those districts, people just need to be told we don't have the money. Go find it somewhere else. And if the people are not willing to do that, then they need to be thrown out of office because we don't have the money.
I think
that's
you made
the bottom
a great
line.
point, though. You brought up the Riverwalk. We did pass a venue tax extension, and sort of the beauty of that and the way it was sold is, hey, we're going to tax other people who come here. Mm-hmm. And so to me, that's sort of the underlying crux of the problem we're facing right now. It's like, great if somebody else is paying for it. Great if we don't see it immediately coming out of our pockets, but we sure would like that.
But isn't that how we get everything passed in San Antonio? I mean, it is, right? We're going to make the tourists pay for everything.
Well, that's what they did in Dallas. That's how they're paying for the stadium in Dallas. They used the venue tax, which is comprised of car rental tax and then the hotel tax, an expansion of the
we're not
hotel
making
tax.
anybody pay for it, Elaine. If they choose to come here, they're paying for it. But that's not the same thing as shifting the expense of one state onto the taxpayers of another state.
Right, but the point is, philosophically, if you're looking at it, it's saying we want this thing, but we don't want to pay for it. So we'll make these other people. It's like,
I disagree. I think it's saying we have a very attractive revenue-generating feature, and we're going to maximize it. And if people want to visit, we're going to make some money off of them. I don't think that's irresponsible. That's just taking advantage of what you have.
I'm not suggesting that's irresponsible per se. I think what I'm saying is it's part of the underlying problem. It's we want the money, we want to spend the money, we want to have the amenities, but we don't want to think that it's coming out of our own pocket. So, and I don't know, and I do think the last time the venue tax went through, there was talk that it was going to drive people away, that in fact it would kill the tourist economy. It didn't, and it probably won't this time either. So I don't know that that's the problem. It's not like people look, when you're comparing hotel room rates, our hotel rates still look pretty good compared to, say, Houston or Dallas, that sort of thing. But it does create sort of this long-term issue. Where do you go to next? There's certain things you can't use a visitor tax, as we rebranded it for. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess philosophically, I'm okay with taking advantage of whatever we have that other people want to visit, whether it's our climate, whether it's the Riverwalk, whether it's the Alamo, but
our soccer parks,
or our soccer park. But you know what? Yeah. But there is going to have to be a point where I think it becomes politically popular to be the cutter, to be the slash and burn guy. The only